Thank you for that introduction. That was a fabulous introduction, so I don't need to say anything about myself now. It's all been covered. So today I want to talk about accountability. I sort of don't hear enough conversations about accountability, how we hold people accountable, what it means, accountable to whom. And I really also want to be talking about it not as accountability as a buzzword, but as a culture of ownership and a foundation for success, because I think it's absolutely critical. I don't know a product manager who isn't familiar with the accountability paradox, which is we are expected and held accountable for delivering everything. That's just how it works. Product is held accountable, but generally speaking, we have no direct authority over most of what delivery needs to be. Most places, we don't set the budget, we don't have the engineers, we can't tell the engineers exactly what to do, and we have more stakeholders than we know what to do with. So all we can do as a product manager is lead through influence, storytelling, all of the skills that you sort of learn as you go ahead in product and you learn how to do it. And it's really all influence without authority. And this really can slow things down and hold you back, particularly in matrixed environments, when you don't have that real ownership, but you do still get held accountable. I do want to talk about what it means to be held accountable, particularly in this context. Think about outcomes, not tasks. Are you making commitments? What are the commitments you're making? Do you have metrics? Are you tracking that? Another thing I think is really important that doesn't always get talked about enough is transparency. Is everything you're doing transparent, visible, open so people know what's going on? Can you solve problems in that sort of transparent way? And can you sort of go back and show how you got somewhere and why you made the trade-off decisions you did? And lastly, it's responsibility for owning the outcomes of our choices and what decisions we made and how we move forward with them. And that's both success and failure. I think one of the classic lines, adages is, success has many parents, but failure is an orphan. This is sort of where it is you have to take ownership for both your successes and your failure. If you don't take ownership for the failures you were involved in, first of all, you never learn, you can't get better, you can't improve. But secondly, it undermines trust, and the more often you do that, the less likely you are to have the ability and the authority to get things done. Let's also talk about accountable for what. I sort of look at three different areas. One is the product strategy. What are we trying to build? How are we thinking through what we're trying to build and where we're going? That's really so core to everything we do. The next is, of course, product execution. Are we executing? Can we get things out the door? Are we breaking things down in ways that lets us move forward quickly and effectively? And then lastly is back to the measuring. Are we doing outcomes? I think almost every PM has been in at least one situation where everything was about did you launch, did you launch, did you launch, and features. And it's really just important to move beyond did the feature get out the door into did the feature or the product or the direction or the strategy have the positive outcome we expected. If it didn't, why didn't it? How can we adjust based on that? But you need to have that as a core thing you're looking at, not just did it get out the door. Another thing I want to mention is who are you accountable to? First of all, it's customers. At the core of it, we're building products. We're building products to solve problems and to meet customer needs and to really just empower customers of any sorts. At Dow Jones, I work across a variety of consumer-facing publications, Wall Street Journal, Barron's, MarketWatch, a whole slew of them, and a variety of B2B products. Factiva, a lot of risk and compliance products, there's a huge number, and they deal with very different use cases and very different audiences. But in all of the cases, we're trying to solve a customer problem. If the customer, generally it's about news and information in different contexts, but there's a problem and we need to land that. Stakeholders. There are a lot of stakeholders. There are always a lot of stakeholders. I've never worked anywhere there haven't been a lot of stakeholders. How do you communicate with them and bring them along and talk to them in their language? Because if you're not talking to them in their language, it won't work. So how do you do that, and how do you explain what you're doing and why you're doing it and why you're making the decisions you're making in their language? And the last thing I want to talk about is the business. At the end of the day, if the businesses we work for aren't successful, the rest of it doesn't matter. We can have something that's amazing. We can have something that we would love to use on a daily basis, that we build our lives around and care deeply about, and that all the customers use it. But if we haven't built the revenue model or something else to fund it, it doesn't matter how great it is. It's just the reality. One thing that I find interesting about the role of product management with respect to accountability to the business is, in most cases, product managers don't have direct P&L accountability. Some do, but most don't, which means we are not being held on quarter by quarter by quarter metrics around numbers. We need to be looking at the long-term sustainability of the business. So it gives us an interesting perspective in which to balance out some of the other stakeholders and other teams who are really thinking, oh, I need to get this thing out today to get these numbers before the end of the quarter. We're the ones who can go and say, yes, I understand that, and sometimes that will be the right answer, but let's look over the next year. Let's look over the next 5 years. Are we creating too much tech debt or product debt or other sorts of problems in the long term? Is doing this the wrong direction? Let's be sure we're building sustainably for the business. I think accountability to the business is not doing what they say and jumping, but having the conversation with them about how to balance those short-term and long-term trade-offs. Managing expectations. If you don't manage expectations, everything goes off the rails. You have to manage up and manage down. I'll start with managing up. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? What is the context? How have you aligned with all the stakeholders? Do you have all of those pieces in place? This is sort of very, very critical. And then, of course, there's managing down, which is trying to deliver the same thing, but talking to people who may have less context than you do, providing them the context, giving them what they need so they can make autonomous decisions, so they have a sense of ownership, so they know the pieces of work they need to do. So it's really important that as you're working through things to drive accountability, you be really focused on the managing both up and down and how it all comes together. There are a lot of failure modes I see. The first one is just basically unclear ownership. Everyone kind of thinks they're an owner, but you get to a decision point and things don't go so well. Or a diffused accountability where everyone's like, this isn't really my problem. I don't really have skin in the game here. That doesn't work. Those things both are ways that things fall apart. Lack of transparency. If people don't know why you're making the decisions, how you're making them, what the trade-offs are, and in the case of stakeholders, you understand the impact on the things they care about and they're being measured on, and that you're not just ignoring them, that's an absolute fail, and it really will be problematic in the long term. We all see the, oh, how many features have you launched? Launch. Did you do the task? Did you write the thing? That doesn't work. That gets you a lot of features, but it doesn't necessarily get you positive outcomes. Short-term firefighting, if sales comes to you and says our biggest customer is not going to renew if we don't deliver this feature this month and the business won't survive, you deliver the feature. So I don't want to imply that never, ever should you jump for short-term things, but you need to think about them and interrogate them carefully. Is this a real need that we absolutely have to handle now? Or is this just somebody, I kind of want this right away, so I'm making it a fire? So you have to be asking those, and you have to have the ownership and willingness to say, I'm accountable for where this is going. No, we should not be doing this. And that's always a hard conversation to have. Lastly, I want to talk about misaligned incentives. Many, many years ago when I was at Google, it was remarkable because people got promoted for launching features. If you launched something, you got a promotion, or you were eligible for, you'd be considered for a promotion. So people who really wanted promotions would focus on features, then they would launch a feature, and then they look for the role where they could launch their next feature, because they could then show a path of launching. In my later time there, I loved how Google switched what it was talking about and stopped talking about launches and started talking about landings. Are you landing features? Did it have outcomes? Did it have impacts? Did it do the right thing? If you only promote people for launches, you're going to get so many launches, but they're not necessarily what you should be launching. Related is ask yourself, have you ever promoted or seen someone promoted for deprecating something, for taking something down, for killing a feature? I've promoted people for this. It's always a struggle because I have to explain how much work it takes to cleanly deprecate something and how often that drives more impact than adding on top. So think about that. Are you incentivizing and promoting the right things in your organization, even when they're the opposite of launches, even when it's about cleaning up things so you have better outcomes? A lot of the tools we have to look at how to manage these things are really broken. I am not a fan of RACI. For those of you who haven't dealt with RACI, it's a decision format, a structure, where you end up with a grid of who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Personally, not a big fan for a variety of reasons. One, this is really task-oriented and really leans into silos rather than cooperation and communication. If you're having to break it down like that, that's not a great thing. RACIs also highlight or are used when there's a lack of trust. Nobody says, we're all working together great and collaborating great, let's make a RACI. It's not how it plays out. I've spent so many times in so many meetings arguing over RACIs, and it really surfaces all the tension and brings them to the forefront without actually resolving them or setting up collaboration and ongoing joint accountability. So it really makes me uneasy. And I will note that never once in my career have we hit a point where there's a hard decision and somebody said, let's pull out the RACI and see who gets to make that. So much time building these things, never once have they been pulled out to actually be referenced or used. So I want to talk about how I think about accountability and a framework for thinking about it, which is instead of looking at RACI or I didn't mention, there's some newer frameworks like DACI and RAPID that also look at decision-making formats. But I like thinking of what I'm calling the GROW framework, where you look across goals, responsibilities, outcomes, and then wins. First of all, in goals, we've covered this a little bit already, but clarity of outcomes. What are we doing? Do we have consistent priorities? Do we understand where we're going and why we're going there? Unified metric and languages. How many times have you been in meetings where people are looking at competing metrics, or they haven't worked through what success looks like, or they haven't pulled it forward? So being sure you've got those and being sure that you're using consistent language. I've also seen a lot of places where teams have to work together and have been using different language and building totally different things and convinced they're doing the right thing and cooperating really well together. Be sure you're using the same terms the same way. And bidirectional communication. It's so important that when goals are being built, they're not top-down. There probably needs to be some level of top-down direction, but the people closest to the ground, closest to the work, closest to the tools really need to go a long way in terms of setting what the goals are and making clear and owning those goals. If they're just handed down, the people in the team are not going to have the same sense of ownership and responsibility as if they said, hey, this is what we should be doing, and really committing to it and buying into it that way. Responsibilities. This is important, which is, I really like setups where engineering, product, and design, the sort of heads, there's somebody from each of those who are co-owners of the outcomes, and they work together to get to those outcomes. If you don't have those as co-owners, you inevitably get to the, well, I built what product told me, and the, well, we defined it well, but engineering went in a different direction. It's not good. It's not good for anyone. It's not good for the company. The people involved hate it. It's just bad all around. So having an environment where there's joint accountability and you have to work together and talk together and drive things together and be held accountable together really changes the entire conversation. I am also a huge fan of a collaborative escalation path. This is one I saw working with a security team once where what I was representing and what they were representing had some places where there were just absolute trade-offs. And we both the teams respected each other, we got along really well, and we'd try and come to a mutually agreed upon point. And when we couldn't, we'd sit down and write a joint document where we'd lay out everything we always agreed on. It was very friendly, very civil. It wasn't an escalation of, you're wrong, I'm going to your boss. It was we need somebody to break this deadlock, and we want to do it fast. We don't want to spend another 3-4 weeks arguing amongst ourselves. So a clear collaborative escalation path that's about getting things done and moving things forward and flagging those moments, rather than being about winning. It's not about winning. It's about getting alignment. Empowered autonomy, with pushing goals further down the organization, with pushing accountability to folks in the engineering, product, and design triads that are building, you really can have much more empowered autonomy, and the people who really understand what's going on are in a much better place to make some of those decisions than people who are many levels above and can kind of set a big strategic view, but don't understand the details on the ground. It's really easy for a bunch of VPs to get together and set a direction. It's really hard at the implementation level to understand what those details are and what that means. So letting those teams be able to do that is huge. Outcomes. People need to have outcomes and consequences, but they can be both positive and negative. If somebody does an amazing job, celebrate them, give them positive recognition, give them rewards, incentivize that. If somebody makes a reasonable, any mistake can be made once because people need to learn and things just go wrong. Did they make reasonable and rational decisions with what they had at the moment? And are they, with the knowledge they had at the moment, are they owning those? Are they acknowledging what didn't go well and would go differently? All of those things are phenomenal and allow for growth and are sort of consequences that aren't like, you're bad, you're punished, but are you learning from this? Are you sharing the learnings? That's a great accountability moment that isn't about you screwed up. It's about how do we grow from things that didn't go well, but how do we take ownership? It's such a change in attitude when something goes wrong and somebody just comes up to you and says, I did it, this is what went wrong, this is why it won't happen again, and this is what I'm going to change. It's just a different conversation than when you're sort of trying to dig into it and figure out what's going on. It's so important. And last up, let's think about wins. What are the wins? How have you succeeded? Have you succeeded for the customers, the business, your internal partners? What are those wins and how do you think about them going forward? Be sure you can articulate what they look like, how to assess them. The assessment, as I've talked about already, should really have been clear up front when you set the outcomes and objectives. But this is so, so important that you acknowledge, celebrate, collaborate, and make it clear what it is and that you've set up for the wins from the beginning. So let's talk a little bit about implementing this. So product vision document and quarterly OKRs. Will note that it says 5 to 10 years. In this day and age, with change happening as it is, 1 to 2 years might be lucky, but let's acknowledge that you do need a vision of where you're trying to go, and you need the regular goal setting and the regular checking in and the regular communication. Responsibilities. Team OKR commitments and negotiations. If you're not negotiating with the team, if you're not driving that, you're not going to get the outcomes you want. Continuous discovery and roadmaps. We all know how important it is to keep doing discovery, to keep your roadmap, to know what's coming, to know why you're doing it, and to make changes as you learn new things. Outcomes. How are you reviewing them? Are you sharing the positive and the learnings across the organization? Are you making it clear that you're looking for both and these are both good things and both acceptable? Are you celebrating? Are you sharing? How are you making outcomes resonate across the org? And lastly, wins. What is the impact? Have you delivered impact? Have you delivered great outcomes? Have you really changed things? Or even have you delivered really strong learnings that you can bake into your processes and plans going forward? So this is sort of a framework in terms of a good way of thinking through how are you setting things up? How are you building those systems and processes across your organization as a whole to help drive accountability and help people really feel like they own and take responsibility and accountability for the work they're doing, and that you're really able to deliver that. That really opens up for you the ability to do a much better job in delivering on your goals, on what you're trying to do, on what the organization is trying to do, and ultimately on how you're trying to help your customers. And with that, thank you very much. I appreciate you all taking the time to listen.